HIV and AIDS is the one that kills the most people. And AIDS stands for Acquired Immunodeficiency Syndrome, and it just basically weakens your immune system. And HIV stands for Human Immunodeficiency Virus. And HIV is the name of the organism that causes AIDS, and you can have HIV without necessarily having AIDS. And the different ways people can get AIDS are through bodily fluids, mother-to-child transmission, and unprotected sexual contact. During the first few weeks, there aren't any symptoms typically, and then after that, they begin to develop. And these symptoms include swollen lymph nodes, fever, diarrhea, and weight loss. And it takes around 10 years to develop fully into AIDS. AIDS and HIV is such a serious problem because it affects so many different places in the world. And as of 2009, there were 33.3 million people with this virus. Sub-Saharan Africa is one of the places that is most affected, and 2/3 of HIV-infected people live there. In 2009 alone, 1.3 million children and adults died, and more than 15 million Africans have died in total. Around 30% of global infections outside Sub-Saharan Africa are IV drug users. And homosexual people are also very vulnerable to this virus. Men who have sex with men are 4 times more likely to be HIV positive than the general population. And HIV prevalence for homosexuals is between 20% and 40% in some places in Africa.
So one of the biggest challenges of treating HIV and AIDS in South Africa is the poverty, because having to take all those drugs is really hard to pay for it. In Sub-Saharan Africa, actually 60% of the population spends less than $1 a day, which is like 1 metro bus ride for us. So what we need to do is they have antiretroviral therapy, which is like taking multiple medicines and drugs to it's like taking multiple drugs because the HIV can react quickly and become immune to, if you would only take 1 medicine a day, it would become immune to it. And so taking multiple ones a day increases the chance of helping in getting rid of the symptoms. But there's no actual cure for HIV, but taking antiretroviral drugs prevents the symptoms, and it can actually work for a long, long time. And like I said, one of the hardest things is dealing with poverty and finding a way for them to pay for the medicines. So there's a bunch of, there's actually PEPFAR is one of the big U.S. donors to South Africa, and it stands for, it's like the President's Emergency Fund for HIV and AIDS. And they give a lot of money to the South African government, but unfortunately the South African government is reluctant to give support and funding for certain stigmatized groups, such as like people in the sex industry and drug users, like injecting drug users. So I still think they should get treatment though for HIV.
So I did prevention, and there are 3 main things you should do there are a few main things to do to prevent getting HIV and AIDS. And one of them is do not share needles or syringes. So after a needle is used, if you do drugs, like what he said, then you should properly dispose of it or get your own. And then either use a condom or get tested to know if your partners have HIV and AIDS, because unprotected sex is one of the main reasons that HIV and AIDS being spread so fast around the world. And another reason it's getting spread is mother to child, like through birth. And so if you are diagnosed with HIV and AIDS, then you shouldn't have like multiple children, because the more children you have, the higher chance it is for more of them to have HIV and AIDS. And there's also vaccines you can get to prevent getting it before you have it. And so, yeah, you should try and prevent getting HIV and AIDS because it's bad.
I don't think you need vaccines. I mean, there's drugs.
Yeah, drugs.
There's many ways of helping HIV and AIDS victims. African countries are trying to give people RAV, which stands for antiretrovirus. Also, African countries are trying to get people tested and prevent opportunistic infection. Botswana started a national treatment program. Already, like 3 countries that have the most infected people got treatments, and a lot of people got better. A coverage rate of 80% in Botswana, 88% in Rwanda, and 76% in Namibia. In 2009, about like 4 million people were receiving treatments in Africa. But still, some countries were not getting as much treatments as other countries. But still, up to 50 to 75% people were not receiving treatments in Mali, Chad, Zimbabwe, and Kenya. Testing can have a significant benefits. People who get tested have a higher chance of infection, being employed, and have accurate HIV knowledge. South Africa is aiming for like half of their people to get tested every year. People that live with HIV have a higher risk of developing TB or other diseases. South Africa is accounting for 28% of the world's people who are living with TB, both TB and HIV. People should start eating right and be as healthy as possible.
I just want to clarify that there's no like actual cure for HIV, but taking the antiretroviral drugs can actually postpones the symptoms for a little longer.
Did you read anything about social problems with any of your prevention stuff? I mean, are people against it for any reason, like using protection or any of the other things that you said about prevention? Is it a problem getting over social norms against the safe behavior?
Well, I know that we watched something about people didn't want to like go get tested to see if they even had it, so they wouldn't know if they had it anyways. And then I didn't read anything about people not like socially, but
Well, I read that people are actually kind of scared to go and get tested for this because they're being discriminated against in their like towns and in their lives because they have HIV. So they're a little worried to go and get tested for it. So actually on our website we were supposed to like think of a way to fix this. And I suggested that the South African government has like they like make everybody go and get tested like every year, so it would take away hopefully the I guess discrimination of that and just like stereotype of having HIV.
Or getting tested.
Yeah.
You still have the issue.
Yeah.
Once you-
For like prevention wise, also I think that sometimes just condoms and stuff just aren't available for them, so that they can't use it because there's no like programs that they can.
Think of social things in our country would be not supplying needles to needle drug users.
yeah.
You know, that's a program that's been used in great effect in some places, but is socially not acceptable in most places in this country.
He's talking about needle exchange programs where you can bring in to properly places, they're like shooting galleries where drug addicts can go and shoot their drugs, and they're supervised by nurses. And in that way, the needles are, are disposed of properly, and it keeps people. It's sort of what's called a harm reduction model, where instead of saying no drug use is bad, don't do drugs, therefore, and no one will get HIV. That's easy to say, hard to actually have happen. So the idea of harm reduction is to say, okay, well, people are going to do drugs, unfortunately, and those that do, we're going to provide an environment that's going to make for as safe as possible outcome.
I just had a couple other things. You gave us some great statistics. I think I would point out that the HIV epidemic is primarily heterosexual. I think a lot of the statistics for homosexual men, particularly, that you had were probably maybe for our country, or there. So I just wanted to point out that the epidemic is different in different countries, just because of what population it started in, and people tend to have their own circles of friends and sexual partners. But in Africa, definitely the rates for homosexuals would be much, much lower. I like the way that you talked about relating $1 a day to a bus ride. I think our first presentation did a nice job too of relating like testing and different things to everyday life. Maybe you could distinguish between HIV and AIDS a little bit earlier in the presentation. And then PEPFAR, President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, is actually everywhere, not just in South Africa, so I wanted to point that out. PEPFAR is huge funding. It's pretty much the largest chunk of global health funding in the world for any disease, and it's complicated, but it's actually mostly run through NGOs, through non-governmental organizations, and so our government in the U.S. gives this money to an NGO, and then they set up in different countries to do HIV testing and treatment, and that can actually be pretty controversial too, because the countries' governments don't maybe get enough support, but that's a different issue. The multiple children, I would be a little concerned. I don't mean to like pick on you guys, but I think we brought up some good ethical issues in this AIDS presentation, and so I would be cautious not to make statements like people shouldn't have more children, just because we don't want to. That's just kind of an ethical issue. But I think what you were trying to say is that there is a risk of transmitting HIV to children when you have kids, and so and then there are drugs that prevent that and can drop it down to 3%. So you would definitely want, obviously, the more somebody has a child, more children they have, the more likely one of their kids is to have AIDS when they have them. But glad that you talked about mother-to-child transmission. So. And opportunistic infections and all of that would be great. Mandatory testing, also kind of an ethical issue, not really something that we could implement, but.
Yeah, I have an input. I think they're right. They should have more kids because it's already overpopulated, and they're gonna give it to their kids. They should just have less sex and not have sex.
So
and they would have
those are statements.
Let's get that done right now.
Those are things that you would have to be careful not to say. Opinion, and it's an opinion. Yes, an opinion, and this is not actually a thing. So you just have to think about ethics and implementing.
Just one point about that. I think part of the deal with the HIV/AIDS epidemic is that the people that are most affected are mostly marginal people that don't have a lot of power in this country and other countries. Women, historically, in this country and other countries, just for women in general, especially in other countries, but still in this country, many populations of women don't have quite the power if they're not on equal standing. And so it's not always a woman's, she might not always have choice about, depending on her situation, her life, and her partners, and her husband, or whether or not she becomes pregnant. It's not always in her power. And I think we're very privileged in this country as women